Hope you've done it. We got a few pound earned last year, but if you didn't, maybe this year's your year. So we're going to have food about 9 o'clock. We're going to start the procedures in about 2 minutes. So thank you for attending another good event.
Hello everyone. Hello. Thank you everyone for coming. Big thank you for everyone. This is our 4th year of doing this. We couldn't believe when we started it that we'd last this long. 4 years, it's longer than an ATR race course, it's longer than an Alan Potts stable jockey. And that's all thanks to you. Thanks to you for coming back. Thanks to you for coming for the first time, if indeed you are coming for the first time. Thanks to people watching at home on Facebook Live. Thanks to St. Kent's for their brilliant hosting skills and room. Thanks to Betfair and Paddy Power because they've given us a large sum, £1,000, to be split up in free bets. And that comes via the raffle tickets, and it also comes via the quiz sheets. So do please try and fill in the quiz sheets. At half time, take them over to the lads in the corner near the door, and they will mark them and go through them. We've got cameras dotted around everywhere which you couldn't see, and I know every single one of you that's been on Google and tried to find out those, so that will be done. Here's our panel. My name's Jamie Lynch, Chief Correspondent for Untitled Title at Timeform. We have got David Cleary, Timeform stalwart, our UK pundit. Hello, David. We have got Martin Dixon, brother of Chris. We have got Dan Barber, who does a 5 out of 10 impression of Nicky Richards. And we've got Billy Nash, who does a 7 out of 10 impression of David O'Leary.
Hello, as I say, at the end of the day.
This is a Cheltenham preview, but it's also a Timeform Cheltenham preview, and hopefully you know that we know that you know that racing isn't so black and white as you often hear at some Cheltenham previews, because some people change persona, some people become bold and brash. It's much more complex and much more subtle than that. So here's some things that you won't hear tonight at a Timeform Cheltenham preview evening, just to make sure that you're aware of the fact that you won't be too surprised or too disappointed if you don't hear, because racing is a complex game. It's full of subtleties, and you won't hear any of us say, unless the drink disappears, this is an absolute steering job. Hard case to make for that. Because we work for Timeform, you won't hear us say that. I can't have it at any price. You might not hear us say that at any time. Again, because of the difficulties of the calling of Cheltenham. You might not hear us say, also, is the best handicapped horse in the world. Not just, I think it's well handicapped, or I think it's ahead of its mark. It's the best handicapped horse in the world. And because we work for Timeform, you definitely won't hear us say, I'm a rounded human being with the right work-life balance. All of us are complete nerds, and that's why we're still staggered and surprised that all of you come and listen to us. But it's not just us talking. We're trying to make this as interactive as we can. I'll come round at the end of each half with the mic and get questions about anything, horses specific, race specific, whatever you want, we'll deal with it. But we'll start, of course, with the first race of the meeting, which is the Supreme Novice Hurdle. Billy, give us an interpretation of Get a Bird. This is a race we associate with Willie Mullins. Is Get a Bird in the same sort of league as the Batuas and Duvans who we've seen win this race before?
Good evening, everyone. Certainly he is, Jamie. If you look at his, he's had a typical Willie Mullins preparation. He won the Moscow Florida at Punchestown, which is a race that Willie kind of targets with his better novices every year. He's won it with the likes of Min and Duvan. And if you take that race just by itself, Get a Bird posted a better, certainly Timeform performance. He ran to a bigger Timeform figure in that Punchestown race than either Min, Duvan or Voltour. So that'll tell you the calibre of this particular horse. He really could be anything. He won a point, he won both of his bumpers, and he's won 2 over hurdles, and every single race he's running has worked out really well. The only slight concern I'd have about Get a Bird, and it is only a slight one, is that we haven't seen him going left-handed. All his runs on the track have been right-handed. He went left-handed once in a point-to-point on his debut and ran out of the second fence. So I don't know what you can read into that, but he hasn't been left-handed under rules. Apart from that, I don't see too many negatives with Get a Bird.
Not too many negatives with Get a Bird. David, what is the British contingent? Is that strong? Who takes your eye for them?
Well, the 2 horses that are most prominent in the market are the horses that were first and second in the Tolworth Hurdle at Sandown at the start of January. Somerville Boy and Kalashnikov. Kalashnikov went on to win the Betfair Hurdle, very different type of race from the Tolworth Hurdle. I was impressed with Somerville Boy at Sandown. He was a maiden going into the race, he wasn't particularly fancied, but in a well-run race for the first time, I thought he won the race fair and square. And I'm a bit surprised that Kalashnikov is half the price of Somerville Boy going into next week. It should be a well-run race again, it should be a race that will suit Somerville Boy. Perhaps Kalashnikov developed from the Sandown race to the big field scenario at Newbury, but I suspect that in a Supreme Novices, that there will be something with a bit more speed than Kalashnikov has got, unless they get all the rain that they're expecting over the weekend and it turns into a real mud bath on Tuesday.
There's a long history, isn't there, really, of horses that running the Betfair theoretically have a good chance at the weights when they're running the Supreme. My tent or yours. Darlan did it as well. Ballyandy last year won the race, and again, like, had a solid chance at the figures. But there's one thing running to a race in a handicap compared to running it in a Supreme, because you're just up against a different calibre of horse. Class doesn't out so much as it does in handicap. So a horse that's of the calibre and quality of something like Ballyandy, it's all well and good winning off your mark and being too well handicapped for the others. You're likely, in fact, you're almost certain to meet a potential star in a race like the Supreme. Kalashnikov, for me, goes there with less compelling form claims than other recent winners of the race anyway. Ballyandy probably achieved more. Certainly my tent or yours achieved more, and he ran into a pretty smart one that day, as we know. So I share, and I suspect it's a collective for the panel, I share negativity about Kalashnikov. For 2 miles, potentially less testing ground. For me, he's a budding stayer, and I think it's a big ask to suspect that he can, to hope or whatever, to not only reproduce that form, but build on it under completely different circumstances. Newbury was a mud bath. He showed loads of stamina to win it. He looked about 4th best for a fairway in the straight. Can he really reproduce that sort of form? And I agree with Clears. I mean, I don't say I want to be back in Somerville Boy either, but there's no justification even to think why he'd reverse the form with Somerville Boy, let alone having twice the price.
Are we allowed to say we can't have Kalashnikov at any price? Allowed to say that, are we? No.
Round if you can be.
Yeah, suspect. No, genuinely, it is a pretty strong view of mine at the festival. I think getting against Kalashnikov in sort of all the markets that you can, in terms of maybe place laying, taking on him in match bets with the likes of Mengley Khan and Paloma Blue, who are 2 horses I've mentioned at big prices at the moment in the market for the Supreme from Ireland. I think it's a good way of making money out of the Supreme Novices. Get a Bird's a horse that, for me, deserves to be favourite. He won't get any shorter than he is at the moment in the anti-purse betting. He's about a 13 to 8 tops at the minute. I would imagine, particularly with it being day 1, race 1, you'll get every bookmaker under the sun pushing out the first favourite of the day. You'll end up getting 9 to 4, 5 to 2, something like that anyway, so there's no point in playing him at the moment. He probably is a worthy favourite. It's worth mentioning Mengley Khan, the horse I mentioned of Gordon Elliott's, was trying to give him a penalty, concede a penalty to him when Get a Bird beat him at Punchestown last time out. Now, Get a Bird was really impressive, and I suspect the penalty wasn't the difference on the day, but Mengley Khan's a pretty speedy horse. Probably will, it will be less testing ground, even if it's soft ground at Cheltenham next week anyway. That'll suit Mengley Khan, who's an ex-flat horse. He was a good horse on the flat for Hugo Palmer. He's got a lot of speed. Less testing ground will suit him. I think he'll run well, Mengley Khan, for Gordon Elliott. Like I said, maybe backing him each way, or getting against him in a match bet with Kalashnikov. Plenty of bookmakers will be offering that on the day, and you can actually get a bet on it. And Paloma Blue's the other horse that I've mentioned for Henry de Bromhead. He was matching Samcro for a long way in the Deloitte last time out. He was too keen early, pulled his way to the front, was still on the bridle turning into the home straight, and he was probably second last off the bridle and ended up getting very tired having pulled too hard early on. But he's a speedy horse, tailor-made for a Supreme really. He was a very, very good bumper horse last season as well, Paloma Blue. He was second to Fiona at Punchestown, who obviously won the champion bumper at Cheltenham, if you remember, prior to that. So he was a very good bumper horse. He's got loads of ability. I would think he would come to his own on slightly better ground in the spring. And there's few better trainers out there than Henry de Bromhead for getting horses cherry ripe for the big occasion like the festival. So, like I said, Mengley Khan, Paloma Blue would be 2 big positives for me. Kalashnikov a massive negative, and get against him in any which way you can.
Anything else from the Supreme, anyone? No? I think the issue with Get a Bird is just the price. It's not that he's done anything wrong, it's not that he's not promising or he's got that star quality, it's just the fact that he is so short in the betting when you consider that those previous Mullins winners were all bigger prices on the day than Get a Bird is now.
I thought the really impressive thing about him at Punchestown was the way that he quickens after 2 out, and then he quickens again after the last, and it's not often you see a horse do something like that in a race, sort of to quicken twice, to sort of put the race to bed on both occasions.
We just, I'm just going to say, it's sort of fast. I think he's not going there with this Duvan sort of photo aura about him, but he is an unbeaten horse, isn't he? And I think it's got lost in a lot of the discussion that he's been to the track 4 times, won every time under rules, and has been basically increasingly impressive every time he's got to the course. It's so true what Cleary says. It was Mengley Khan, Carter McKay get alongside at the second last, and you think, oh, he might be in a bit of bother here, but he goes away from them without even leaving the bridle, and then when he really asks him, and that, I think Patrick was on board that day, wasn't he? So he'll have the Walsh factor. I'm sure he can roll in some improvement into that as well for Walsh taking over. So he's not got the same. I know it's just not the same aura about the horse that they have been, and the same hype and reputation.
He's a shorter price though, Dan. To be fair, Duvan was 2 to 1, I think, when he went off. But
it looks a significantly weaker race to normal to me.
Yeah, I think collectively we'd probably all agree that he's a strong, worthy favourite for the Supreme Novices. At the moment, you can back him at 13 to 8. There's absolutely no point. Wait until the morning of the race. If you're all over him, none of us would put you off at all. You will get bigger prices. Just wait until 10 o'clock on the morning, and some bookmaker out there, Betfred, Sky Bet, whatever they are, will push him out to 5 to 2, 11 to 4, whatever you like, because that's what they do at the Cheltenham Festival. So just hang fire if you do fancy Get a Bird. In those current markets, I do think those 2 that I mentioned, Mengley Khan, maybe Somerville Boy of David's as well, and Paloma Blue are all big and probably will shorten up between now and next Tuesday.
So it's hard to say with conviction now that 13 to 8 or thereabout is a good price or a backable price about Get a Bird in the first. It's a bit more difficult in the second big race on the day, which is the Arkle, where Footpad is around about the same price as Get a Bird is for the Supreme, and that wasn't the case 5 or 6 days ago when Footpad was more or less odds on across the board. There's been the odd rumour here and there about him over the weekend, which has meant his price has drifted. So, Dan, what's your feeling about Footpad in conjunction with his price? Is he a better favourite at the moment than Get a Bird?
I saw a good tweet about this actually. I mean, it's almost as if someone's overheard a discussion that a Munir and Suede horse wouldn't be ready for the festival from the Arkle. So they've taken a view against Footpad and they've got the wrong one, because 2 days later, So Royale's the one who's missing the race. As a result, the race is almost dead to me, because I thought So Royale each way was a definite play in this race. Glad I didn't do it, and if you did do it, hopefully you got on and run a no bet concession. But I think that the angle with the race for me is that St Calvados has one way of going. Footpad has raced prominently and or made it in his chase start so far. Ditto Petit Mouchoir is rarely far away. In the absence of So Royale, there isn't an obvious one to pick up the pieces now, so I don't even want to look down that route anymore. I think the question that Footpad's got to answer is whether he can go the gallop that St Calvados has. Can he jump as quickly as him and as boldly as him? And has he got an engine that's as big as him? Because the time that he clocked at Warwick was pretty much off the scale, and it was almost like a time trial for him. I think that's almost more impressive that he was able to do it with nothing to push him. I mean, the engine's vast, and just because he's got an unconventional profile, going in via novice handicaps, and not having the top quality hurdles form that Footpad, So Royale, Petit Mouchoir could boast, I think he's probably too big. I wouldn't touch him each way because he's got blowout potential, because if he gets taken on he might be a different beast, but win only, I'd be preferring St Calvados at this stage to Footpad at short prices, particularly of course with these rather negative vibes that we're hearing about the Fab.
I think I agree a lot with Dan. I've been hugely impressed with St Calvados, and it's a different track for him compared to Newbury and Warwick flat tracks that have rewarded his bold jumping. but if he gets into a similar sort of rhythm, then he might just unsettle the two Irish horses. And I think that could be the key to the race, how they go over the first couple of fences. It will be a really strongly run race. You look at the others in the race, I couldn't really entertain Brainpower. I thought he was going to be quite well held, admittedly against Undersow when he fell last time. Had a problem as well. I'm not sure that he's necessarily a horse that's going to relish a sort of really strongly run race, be able to come up the hill under testing conditions. I think it is a race that does lie between the three at the head of the market.
There's one thing further on that as well. Because of this unconventional profile he's got, he's almost like if he was a Mullins horse and he was with such a dark profile as he's got, ex-French, barely ran over hurdles, went via novice handicaps. I think people would be so excited about him. But I think with the other two, yes, they've been very efficient and they were very good hurdlers, but they weren't top notchers, were they? They were champion hurdle also runs to an extent. And I sort of know with the amount of racing that Footpad's had over hurdling, he's not the next Duval, he's not the next Fratore, he's just a very good fluid jumper who's probably mid-160s and may never be any better.
I think the thing about St Calvados is physically and with his demeanour, he looks so much more obviously a chaser. And sort of initially, first time up, they tried to hold on to him, and you just can't hold on to him, you've just got to let him go.
Yeah, I think that's a little harsh on Footpad actually. Plenty of horses will be making their, as 5-year-olds, in the we'll come on to the champion bumper later when we talk about Wednesday. Plenty of horses in the champion bumper will be 5-year-olds, even a couple of 6-year-olds in there. As a 5-year-old, Footpad was finishing 4th in the champion hurdle. He's still a very young horse, he's entitled to be progressing. The way that he jumps fences is, I would say, appreciably better than he jumped hurdles. He's very quick, very fluent, and he's rapidly made up into a better chaser than hurdler, I think, already. His time performance last time out at Leopardstown was one of the best of the season from any national hunt horse in Britain or Ireland throughout the whole season. He clocked a time figure with Timeform of 167. Admittedly, St Calvados was only a couple of pounds behind him at Warwick, and I kind of agree with the guys on the positives about him, but I do think Footpad's relative experience and the experience that he's got of Cheltenham as well, and the experience that he's got of sort of big stage races, if you like, and championship races, stands him in really, really good stead. And for those reasons, he's entitled to be a very, very strong favourite, I think, for the Arkle. I don't think Petit Mouchoir personally will jump well enough. The way that he was early on, admittedly he'd been off the track a while, maybe he was a little bit rusty last time out, but he's still only had 2 chase starts, and I would worry about that with Petit Mouchoir. I think Footpad's a more sort of tailor-made chaser. I'm not going to say, look, he's an absolute stone-cold certainty. He's only 11-8 at the moment. Maybe it's the sort of price that he should be, but I certainly think that he's a very, very strong and really worthy favourite, Footpad.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with everything Ron said. I'm very much in the Footpad camp, and I think I have a lot of respect for St Calvados, but I think that I'm delighted he's running the race. I'm sure Willie Mullins is delighted he's running the race, because I think really what Footpad needs is a lead. He was so impressive at Leopardstown, but he had to do all his own donkey work. He was pretty keen in front, but we saw him the time before when he didn't have to make the running. He's an excellent jumper, he's really efficient, but I think St Calvados will go a proper gallop, which will help Footpad settle. I don't think there's an issue with him settling. I think off a real good run race, it'll be ideal for him. His jumping is so efficient, he's so quick over his fences, that I think it'll really help him. We know he stays farther than 2 miles, which is also a big asset, and I think just everything is in his favour, really. He's taken the fences so well this year. He was 4th in the champion hurdle last year, but really he was not a champion hurdle horse. He was only making up the numbers. But he's a different proposition over fences this year. He really hasn't put a foot wrong, and he's as impressive an novice chaser as we've seen in Ireland for a long time. Now, lots of people are making the case the last time that Petit Mouchoir got pretty close to him. Davy Russell certainly was very easy on Petit Mouchoir. He was coming back after a break. So yeah, I can see the case that plenty of people are saying that Petit Mouchoir will improve and might improve past Footpad, but I can't have that argument for a couple of reasons. I think Petit Mouchoir is a little bit soft. I don't think he'll get up the hill at Cheltenham. I think if it comes to a battle, I certainly wouldn't want Petit Mouchoir on my side. He's also a horse that runs well fresh, so I don't know how much improvement there will be after his comeback run. I don't think there's an awful lot left to work on. And he's also, as we saw at Leopardstown, he's pretty gassy. I know he handled Cheltenham well enough last year, but you know, he's a fairly excitable horse, and he might actually take on St Calvados. If anything will go with St Calvados, it could be Petit Mouchoir, and if the two of them go off in front, then great. Footpad will just pick them up. But either way, I'm firmly in the Footpad camp.
Just one thing generally about this race, there's only 12 entries essentially now because Sir Royale's been moved out of the race, so it does have the potential to cut up pretty significantly. You're probably only going to end up with 6 or 7 runners. If you do fancy one of the big priced horses at the moment, if you've been taken by a Northhill Harvey or something at a very, very big price, then just act now on that, because you're getting 3 places at the moment, and I suspect once the declarations are in on Sunday, you'll be looking at, like I say, 6 or 7 declared, and you'll only get 2 places, about an each way bet. There's even a betting without Footpad market that's available with a few firms, and realistically that, you know, you're only going to have to pick a horse that runs and gets in the first 4 to get a return on that. So if you want to sort of have a look at some of those, it is a race that probably will cut up, and there's probably a little bit of thievery that you can do in the meantime.
Well, Mullins has 5, doesn't it? And Gordon has 2, so you'd be amazed if Mullins ran all of his. I mean, it's just not going to happen, is it, Bill?
You might get your account shut for doing it.
Is there anything we can see? And Ron mentioned Ron Martin. Sorry, anybody who remembers Brookside will know why he's called that. Is there anything at an absolutely massive price who, if St Calvados and Footpad go silly in front and Petit Mouchoir punches his chance away, what can plug into third?
I must admit, I really, really do not see the scenario where Ruby Walsh goes too quick on Footpad. I just
Is
don't.
he even riding it? Because
Even if he doesn't, I don't see it. He's not a horse that has to make the running. I suspect they've just done it with him because he's been like massively short prices and expected to win his races. When he ran in the Champion Hurdle last year, they ran him from mid-division, and he ran really well to finish 4th. So I don't think he will get hooked up. Montalbano might even run for Rich Ritchie and Willie Mullins, and if he does run, he's a proper tearaway, and there's no way that Footpad would be taking him on because he's from the same yard and they'll know that, I suspect. So.
Well, whether it hinders Footpad or not, St Calvados is going to have his way of going. It's going to be a severe test of stamina at the trip. Is there anything in there, we think, at a huge price that can plug into third, having not been in the race? And I was going to say, I don't know if it has been confirmed one way or the other. Maybe, yeah, North of Harvey perhaps, yeah. Is Jacob going to get the ride on Sorrel now, or will this, because he's the retained rider for the owner, or on Footpad, sorry, or will Walsh retain the ride?
No, I think that it's exempt the riding arrangements that Jacob rides for Mania and Suede is all by Willie Mullins' horses, isn't it? I think, yeah.
Is that why I wasn't at that preview now last night? Somebody telling me I wasn't riding.
Yeah, I think he rides the Mullins horses when Ruby or Paul Townend isn't available, but I would expect Ruby to ride it.
Right, so yeah, we've got 2 exceptional horses here really in St Calvados and Footpad, 2 unusual horses, and the run of the race is going to determine, or largely determine, the outcome. But certainly there's a feeling, or 2 or 3 of us feel, that Footpad is probably just wanting this scenario and will use St Calvados as a launch pad to greatness. Just to flesh out a little bit that time analysis, because St Calvados has done some freakish times on his own, as Dan said, from the front like a time trial. But looking at that last race sectionally, we're going to talk about the Champion Chase and Min soon. Min and Footpad ran within half an hour of each other at Leopardstown last month, over the same course and distance, and sectionally between 5 out and 3 out, effectively Footpad took 8 lengths out of Min in that section of the race, which is a pretty staggering state of affairs, and a big boost to him and just shows you of his power. onto the champion hurdle, a bit boring the champion hurdle, and I think the Bouverdere has found the whole division a bit boring himself this season. Is there any danger, Dan, that this sort of pop-picking campaign by Bouverdere might leave him a bit cold, might not put his mind as sharp as it should be for the champion hurdle?
Well, that gallop at Kempton was pretty intense. I mean, let's not forget that. And basically all he's had so far, you're right Jamie, is 3 gallops. I was up at Newcastle the day he won the fight in 5th. Garrity understandably effusive, mainly about just how quickly he jumps, and if you ever watch any of his videos or see his races, I don't think there is a hurdler around who takes off and lands within such a short space of time. He's basically electric. And by dint of others beating themselves and just not being up to scratch for him having the physical issues, the door's almost been open for him, and it's just a case of can he show his form in order to retain his crown. My Tent is one of the potential candidates, but he already beat him fair and square last season, and there is only one horse that can beat him, I think, if he shows his form, and that's Faheen. But he arrives as a horse I wouldn't want to back each way because of the physical setbacks he's had previously. Doesn't make him a competitor. For instance, if he turns up in the Form 2 starts fight where he was pulled up after 4 flights because he wasn't giving Townend any sort of feel. So for him, I don't think there's an each way angle. I'd sooner be looking at the without Bouverdere. And the way I'd look at that is, who's the more vulnerable favourite? Is it Bouverdere in the outright market, or is it Faheen in the without market? And for me, it's the latter, trying to get Faheen out of the first 2.
Yeah, Faheen's clearly in a sort of fragile place right now, and that means a fragile favourite in the betting without Bouverdere market. And do you think we can prey on that fragile favourite potentially for Faheen, the betting without market?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to do that. My Tent, I mean, for obvious reasons, Faheen does have sort of blowout potential completely. We know his ability, but really his form this season doesn't amount to a whole lot. He won the Morgiana in good style, and it was a good time that he clocked that day, in fairness, but since then, obviously, he was a complete flop over Christmas, and then went down to Super Sunday last time out, which is form that's nothing like good enough to even be, in my opinion, competitive in a champion hurdle. It's a pretty disappointing champion hurdle on the whole. It looks a little bit of a walkover, in my opinion, for Bouverdere. He should win. If you're into short prices, if you're into sticking horses in accumulators, things like that, he does look a pretty sure thing, to be perfectly honest. There isn't a horse with his ability anything like the same level of form over the last 12 months or so. I'm wanting Willie Mullins to revert Min to the champion hurdle, but it's not going to happen. He's going to run in the champion chase, but he does have the entry for what it's worth. But look, as I say, it's a disappointing field really, and Bouverdere should win.
Martin mentioned that he'd love to see Min in this champion hurdle field. Is there any chance we'll see York Hill in the champion hurdle field?
From what I believe, I think there's quite a good chance he might run the champion hurdle. I think if he's going to go to Cheltenham, that the champion hurdle is the race certainly that Willie himself is favouring, and has said for a while that he always thought he was a champion hurdle horse. You would think then why they even bother sending him over fences, but look, if he runs in the race, I don't know how you could possibly advise anybody to back him on what he's done this year. He's been hugely disappointing. The first day in the what used to be the Lexus, he didn't settle, didn't get home as a result, so they put a line through 3 mile chases and tried him over 2 miles, and he ran an absolute stinker behind me in the last day. So how he could even send him to Cheltenham on the back of that run, I don't know. Certainly how you could fancy him for a champion hurdle, you couldn't. We do know the engine is there and that he has huge potential, and obviously they think the world of him, but certainly a watching brief advised for York Hill. Going back to Faheen, I think Faheen, look, it was unrealistic to expect him to come back to be as good as he was a couple of years ago. We all got a little bit carried away when he won in his reappearance. He looked very good, but if you look at the bare bones of the form, he only beat Jeski. I know he beat him a long way, but he was always a better horse than Jeski, and I think we just wanted him to be back to where he was. Obviously his second run at Leopardstown was a non-event, and his last run is probably a true reflection of his ability, and if that's as good as he is, then he could struggle to get placed this year. If Mellon hadn't run in that race, I'd have given him a real chance as an each way, kind of possibly without the favourite in that particular market. He was very disappointing. Now I know Willie was putting it down to the fact that he wore a hood. The fact that he drifted alarmingly on Betfair before the race possibly tells a different story. But if he came back to his international run at Cheltenham the time before, then certainly I could see him running a decent race.
He wasn't disappointing for those that were laying him on Betfair, was he? I mean, he took a massive walk. He's the one, and we'll do charity bets later and stuff, but I might as well just declare my interest now that in the without market, because I think it is the way to play this race. It's Mellon that I do like. I think in places about sevens. You basically got him to finish in the first four on the assumption that Bouvardere wins, and I think he could be a different horse if it isn't terrible ground. I mean, he's such a strong traveller, and he's got that one piece of form this season where he didn't settle at all, and he was still upsides on the running, giving £6 to my 10 or yours. Admittedly, he was levels with the new one, but to be fair, the new one had the run of the race, settled perfectly and jumped well. There was no disgrace in losing there, and you're going to have to run to what, 162, 163 to be placed in this. I'm sure Mellon's got that in his locker somewhere. Let's hope he's a bit stronger in the market this time, Bill.
My take on the race really is that I can't really see any flaws in Bouvardere, and I can't really see why he won't win again. And I think probably the main danger is if it was absolutely desperate ground, but I'm not really expecting that. And he has got plenty of form on soft ground, admittedly in pretty weak races, and it's not really his fault. I know Dan and Lynch at the start were saying about the races he's been running in this year, but he did run in 2 Grade 1 races, and it's not his fault that nothing turned up to take him on.
Do you think that generally we might be underappreciating Bouvardere a little bit? Where would you put him in a historical context? Is he a really good champion hurdler, or is he just making the most of a pretty bad bunch that he's up against?
I think he's very good. I mean, I think Altior, if he'd stayed over hurdles last year, would probably have been an even better horse, but obviously he didn't do that, he went chasing. But you look back at that Supreme that Altior won, Min was second, Bouvardere was third. It was a really, really good running of the Supreme, and rather like going back to Istabrac where he only had Theatre World to run against, it's not really Bouvardere's fault that the opposition is so paltry at the moment.
Yeah, just quickly to put a bit of meat on the bone of this reason why the without Bouvardere market makes a bit of appeal. So Faugheen basically, I think to all of us pretty much, is looking like a vulnerable 15 to 8 shot in that market. If there was no Bouvardere, which is literally what you're betting into, Faugheen, I think we would all be willing to and wanting to take him on at 15 to 8 on what he's been doing generally this season. You then go down the list, My Tent or Yours is second fav in that market. Well, you can't really knock him too much, but he's 11 years old. You don't know. In the autumn when he ran and he won the International, everything was in his favour because he was receiving weight all round. Then you've got York Hill, who we've got bomb out potential with. Then you've got Wicklow Brave, who don't even want to line up in a jumps race, never mind win one. Min won't run. Then you're down to Mellon, who Dan obviously fancies. Apples Jade's next in the list. She won't run. I wrote a column on the Timeform website a couple of weeks ago and put up Mick Jazz at a big price each way in this market. You're still getting 3 places. He's 14 to 1, I think. He's 14 to 1. I've got it in front of me. I don't know why I said I think, but he is 14 to 1 with Paddy Power and Betfair. You can back him each way. He's not good enough to win the race, but Davy Russell will ride him. He'll probably give him the patient ride, pick up the pieces a little bit if some of the others go a little bit too quick. He's having his best ever season. As I say, he's not going to win the race, but he doesn't need to. If he hits the frame at 14s, if he's in the first 4, you're going to collect a tidy enough profit.
I just want to excuse myself, I need to do a St. Calvados to the loo. Is that alright? Okay, very quick. Sorry.
Has anyone got a stopwatch?
Those vital sectionals.
So, we're sort of all individuals on the panel, even though we all represent Timeform, and we do have individual opinions, but sort of present them collectively with a consensus. But this is one race and one market in particular where we are all in agreement that Bouvardere's just going to win. In actual fact, the price he isn't a bad price if you want to put him in doubles and trebles. And also that actually the betting without Faugheen market is probably one of the best markets, most appealing markets of the whole week, all because of this understandable fragility around 14 and this feeling that he's either going to roar back to life, which is probably a 10% chance, or the 90% chance that it might just be his last hurrah. So that's the three main races. We're going to have a quick chat about the other races on the Thursday and the Tuesday. Dan's declared... Oh, that was quick. Dan's declared an interest with his charity bet already. One of those is Melon in that aforementioned betting without Bouvert Dare marker. Billy, one of your charity bets also comes on the Tuesday.
Yeah, I've gone for an each-way bet in the final race on the Tuesday, the Close Brothers Novice Handicap Chase. And I've gone each way on a horse called Any Second Now. He's right up at the top of the handicap, which might put a few people off me. He'll have to carry 11-10, but I actually don't think he's badly treated. Still a maiden over fences, but if you look at the horses he's run up against, he was second to Mona Lee, he was second to Invitation Only, he was second to Footpad, and then he was third to Footpad and Petit Mouchoir last time out. The last two runs have been over 2 miles. I'm absolutely convinced he's a better horse going 2.5. He runs off a mark of 145, but his Timeform rating is 147p, so we think there's a bit more improvement to come in him yet. Like, better ground won't inconvenience him. If it stays soft, that's fine too, but slightly better ground won't inconvenience him. I think he's just a bit better than a handicapper, and although he has to give way to pretty much everything in the race, I think it's very hard to keep him out of the first 3, hopefully first 4 if there's more than 16 runners, but he's a really solid option. He's a very good jumper, and he'll give you a good run for your money.
Just mention that race quickly. If anything like last year, there was only about £5 between top and bottom weight anyway, because it's a race that loads of trainers want to run in. So
it will be a little bit more this year because it's gone up to a 145, hasn't it, this year? But it'll still be very tight, I would think.
We've got the Mares Hurdle as well on the first day, which seems a potential procession for Apple's Jade. Would you say that as well?
Well, I suspect it probably will be. I must admit, Vroom Vroom Mag 7-1 non-running her bet does make a little bit of appeal to me. Maybe she's gone, but for me, if she doesn't turn up at the festival, you get your money back anyway. But if she does turn up at the festival, Willie Mullins will only do it if he thinks that she's still got it. In my opinion, he's got 2. Rich Richie and Willie Mullins have got plenty of other entries anyway. They've got Let's Dance. And they've got the current second favourite, Benny Dio, as well. We know Benny Dio. Anyway, but we sat here 12 months ago, sort of tossing a coin between Apple's Jade and Vroom Vroom Bag, pretty much. And now you're looking at 4-6 Apple's Jade, 7-1 non-runner no bet Vroom Vroom Mag. There wasn't much between them last year. She came looming up towards the final fright, Vroom Vroom, and just got edged out towards the finish. I'm not saying she will beat Apple's Jade. Apple's Jade's still a progressive horse. She's probably the best horse in the race, but I do think that's a massive differential in price. If Vroom Vroom Mag comes back to her best form, which, if she turns up, for me it's not out of the question. You look at the likes of Quavega, who came back 5 years consecutively, every single season, coming back on her first start since the previous spring, and Willie Mullins had her absolutely spot on to win the Mares Hurdle every single time. It's not out of the question that he can do the same with Vroom Vroom Mag. So 7-1 non-runner no bet, I think, is a fair price.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure if Vroom Vroom Mag is going to run. The vibes have been a bit more positive about her lately, so maybe she will run. But she's been off the track for the guts of a year. She is 9 now, and Apple's Jade is, after taking her form up another notch. I think Apple's Jade is a bit of a good thing in this, even though personally I think she's running in the wrong race. If she was mine, I'd run her on the stairs because I think she'd win that. I think she's better over 3 miles these days, but she'd get away with 2.5 against these mares. She's clearly the class horse of the race. I would expect her to win. Anybody who's contemplating backing Bouvert Dare, I would say stick her in a double with Apple's Jade, because I think that'll be I know it'll be sharp price, but I think that'll be a reasonable double. But the one really interesting one when I looked through this field was the one that Ron struggled to pronounce there, Benny Didier, I'll call her. Willie Mullins hasn't had her that long. She's only had 3 runs for Willie, all over fences, and she won every one of them really, really impressively. She's got a huge engine. How much talent she has is still a bit up in the air, but if she does run in this race, and I would imagine if she does, it means Vroom Vroom Right probably won't, but she'd be a very good substitute. Her hurdles form in France before Willie got her was pretty good anyway. I think she was third in a grade 3 or 1 or something like that as a 4-year-old. She's improved quite a bit since. She was very impressive, I thought, in a 2 mile mare's chase, beating Astoria at the last day. She only beat her 2.5 lengths, but I think if they'd gone another half a mile, she'd probably have beaten her 25. 2 miles is not her trip. She's a really good mare. If she turns up, she's 7 to 1 is a pretty decent each way price about her. But if she turns up, I'd expect Vroom Mag won't.
Without wanting to get too far into the politics of it, you'd know this better than I, Bill. Do you reckon Mullins still holds any angst about Apples getting moved along with the others? And he'd almost have a target on her head as the one horse that he'd like to beat throughout the week, just to show that he's nobody's mug.
I'm sure if Vroom had beaten her up the hill last week, it would probably, or last year, it would have been his sweetest win of the entire festival. But that's things move on. I'm sure he's got over it at this stage.
I'll just mention the National Hunt Chase because one of my charity bets at the end comes in the National Hunt Chase, Britain's leading magpie, collecting all the information from proper people at Timeform. And it's Jury Duty. Gordon Elliott has won the race 3 out of the last 7 years, and Jury Duty is a horse who has just probably been aimed at the race all year. You need class now and not just stamina to win the National Hunt Chase. It was upgraded to a grade 2, and he's got plenty of class because he beats Presenting Percy and Shattered Love earlier in the season. He jumps really well. He's got the perfect playbook for what this race demands, and I think that it's probably been the target for him all year. So Jury Duty for me in the National Hunt Chase.
Can I have a word about the National Hunt Chase?
As long as it's consensual with Jury Duty.
Well, it's 7 to 1 the field at the moment, and the race is dominated by horses mostly trained by Gordon Elliott, most of which are going to run in other races. And they include Donikos, who I can't imagine that's going to stay 4 miles. It's in all the other races, all the other novice races.
That's been very strong with the RSA, I think.
Yeah, and you've got Presenting Percy in there. He's going to run in the RSA. So, although Jury Duty is 7 to 1, you can get at the moment, the chances are that if he's Gordon Elliott selected, he'll be a fair bit shorter on the day. The horse amongst the British horses I thought was overpriced was the mare Miss Parfois, though she's also got an entry in the Midlands National, and I think I'd be really interested in her for that, because I'm sure she's going to stay. She's a very solid jumper. If she does turn up in the National Hunt Chase, I think she's got a chance, but at a double-figure price. But if she goes to the Midlands National, if she waits for Utoxeter, I'd be really interested in her there.
Anything for the Ultimate, the other handicap on the day? Anyone? Not really strong?
I do have, last goodbye for me. There's 2 horses that's in handicaps over fences that I like this week, and they both come from the same Leopardstown race. One's Vermorvan for Joseph O'Brien, who led under an aggressive ride where he jumped superbly for a long way in that 2.5 mile handicap there at the Dublin Racing Festival. What I liked about Last Goodbye was just how relentless he was, and he comes from the novice handicap at the festival last season, which works out really well. Gold present, 2 taffs, all boosted the form, and Last Goodbye would have been a lot closer had he not been badly hampered. I think it was at the second last, so you could have marked him up there. And if ever a horse is shaped like he'll improve for another crack at 3 miles, it was him, under pressure, probably 3/4 of a mile from home, keeping going, just relentless fashion, getting to Vermorvan after the last, and then leaving him for dead. Nothing else from Ray got into it, so I don't think he was flattered. He's up to 3. The handicapper's had a bit of a say, but I wouldn't be surprised if he could run to mid to high 150s in a staying handicap. He's so unexposed at the trip.
That's Tuesdays and Undusted. Remember, I will come round with any questions at the end of this first half. So anything you want to ask about Tuesday, just hold on a sec. We'll move quickly on to Wednesday. Start Wednesday with, for many people, the headline act of the whole week, which is Samcro. And Martin, remembering that we don't use words like it's an absolute steering job, what's your appreciation of Samcro?
I'm not going to say it. Look, there isn't a better novice hurdler around. He is the most exciting horse at the festival. I think you look at the Timeform ratings and we've got him £1 clear, and you could argue from that his odds are a little bit skinny and cramped. I personally think that he should be a fair bit further clear than that. I think he's absolutely bolted up. Well, he has. He's won literally on the bridle on his last 2 starts. He's clocked time figures in the high 140s without coming under any pressure to do it. So I think his potential is endless pretty much. He's the best novice hurdler around. I think he'll win whatever race he runs in. Genuinely, I do, as long as he stands up. He's the most exciting horse of the week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him. So I think he pretty much does the talking with regards to Ballymore. Again, we do talk about these a little bit, but there are some betting angles as we sit here and speak right now in some of the markets, and the without Samcro market is another one that does offer definite value at this moment in time. I think on the blind side is too skinny in that. It's remarkable really that the Henderson camp haven't even entered this horse for the 3 mile of the Albert Bartlett. To me, he just looks like a thorough stayer. And I'd say similar comments about Next Destination as well, who's in my eyes not got a hope in hell of beating Samcro, and I'm surprised they're not going for the 3 miler, which looks pretty weak. They're the first 2 in that market, and if you go down the prices, Get a Bird's not going to run. Duke de Genèvre, getting my French pronunciations spot on again, isn't going to run. I don't think he's going to run in the Albert Bartlett. And then you're down to Vindication and Black Op at about 8s and 10s. And I do think that at the current prices, you can get on with Sky Bet, Betfair, Paddy Power if you've got any accounts with those 3. I think they do offer Vindication and Black Op offer definite value in the without Samcro market, but very much looking forward and excited to see Samcro again next week.
Samcro.
I don't really have anything to add with Samcro. Everybody has seen him, everybody knows how good he is, but I'd have to disagree with Martin there on Next Destination. I think Next Destination is a really serious contender to Samcro. If anything is going to beat him in the field, it will be Next Destination. He's won all 3 of his starts over hurdles in contrasting fashion, and he's been really impressive, to my eyes at least anyway, on all 3 occasions. The first day at Naas, in a really good maiden hurdle, came to the last, there was 4 or 5 of them together at the last. He made a mistake and still quick and clear on background at Naas, which horses just don't do up that run, and it's a pretty testing track. The next day at Navan was even more impressive, where again, made a mistake 3 out when in a perfect position, came to the second last, a bit untidy, and a horse jumped across him, so all of a sudden from being almost upsides he was about 4 lengths down and about 3rd, and David Mullins just pulled him out to the outside. He was in front on the bridle at the last and he won going away. Again, on heavy ground at Navan, it's 1 horse in 100 will do that, quick in between the second last and the last. And what I really liked about him was the last day at Naas, in a slowly run race, they went no gallop whatsoever. Paul Townend ended up in front way sooner than he wanted to be, but he jumped really, really well and still ended up winning with a good bit more in hand, I thought, than the official margin. Kraken Smart was closing him down at the line, but I think he was only dossing in front. I think he's a really good horse, and I think we haven't seen the best of him. He's by Dubai Destination. I think drier ground, and I hope it will dry out by Wednesday, because if it does, I think we'll see a much better performance from Next Destination. They've minded him with this race in mind, and this has been pretty much his only target all season. Now, I have a lot of respect for Samcro, and he just might be a monster. He could be. Everything he's done so far suggests he is. But if there's one horse in the field to beat him, it's Next Destination.
Is there any chance that Samcro will turn up on Tuesday?
Mr. Calvin. Tony Calvin might know your esteemed colleague, because he's been banging on about it all week.
He hasn't got anything else to do.
According to today's Racing Post, the Jigginstown camp said absolutely no way, unless the heavens open and it's heavy on Tuesday, that the Ballymore is the race he's running in.
Perhaps I can more constructively talk about Black Op that Martin was talking about. I think he's a really interesting horse if they run here or if they run in the Albert Bartlett. He was a bit unfortunate not to beat Santini on trials day, and I think his whole profile is really progressive, and I think he's a really good long-term prospect.
Obviously we work for Timeform and we deal in facts and figures and straight lines and numbers and black and white issues, but our ears are always open to rumours. And I was just on one of these panels last night with Ollie Bell, who'd been at some lunch with Nicky Henderson, and needless to say, and he asked him about On the Blind Side, and he said Nicky Henderson pulled a bit of a face, and it might have been the fact that they've run out of brandy, or it might have been the fact that the rumours were true in that On the Blind Side hasn't been working that well, and that's part of the reason why he hasn't run since for a long time, and part of the reason why there's not much support and momentum behind him in the market, so just on the blind. He is owned, though, by one of Britain's biggest gamblers, isn't he?
Who happens to have a billionaire father. No, but yeah, I think on that with regards On the Blind Side again, he to me looks like a horse that lacks pace. He won well at Sandown last time out, but it was a small field. He was under a bit of pressure down the back straight, and in a big field at Cheltenham on what probably will be less testing ground, I think it's fair to say, if you lose your position a little bit, you can end up in a complete haul. He's running small fields so far, and it hasn't mattered that much because he's still being able to gather his momentum up the hill. But if you watch back that replay of his Cheltenham win when he won the Grade 2 back in the autumn, he looked third best until pretty much halfway up the running. And the couple of horses that were ahead of him finished second and third in that, and nothing like the calibre of horse that he'll be up against in the Ballymore. He's another horse, I mentioned Kalashnikov earlier on, that I would be looking to get against in any which way you can in terms of match bets, place laying, things like that. On the Blind Side would be another one for me that I would just be all over getting against. I think you can make money out of taking him on and being negative on him.
Madness in it really, they're not running that over 3 miles where he'd have more time to organise himself. You can't believe he didn't have an entry, let alone. Yeah, I'm with Ron there, definitely.
Just wrapping the race up and going back to Samcro. It's all about the hype with him, but all the data around all his runs suggested the hype is absolutely true, and we are seeing the beginning of something very special. And one of the sort of things that you go to and try and envisage eventualities why he might not win the Ballymore, one of those is jumping, obviously jumping at pressure, but one thing that almost goes unnoticed or unsaid about Samcro is that he's an absolutely brilliant jumper. His technique means that he makes, even when his stride pattern sometimes isn't right, and yet he just flies over them and glides over them. He's a brilliant jumper, Samcro, and that enables all of that talent and that power to come through.
Look, he's got to live up to the talk and the hype, but there is a very real potential that he does. He might just be the best horse that we see at the festival all week, and that's saying something about a novice hurdler. It's a pretty bold statement, but he could be the best horse that we see all week, and you know we should all look forward to seeing it.
Next race we're going to talk about is the Rsa Chase, the Grade 1 for novices. We'll start with Billy on this because obviously it's dominated by the Irish, in particular 2 horses, one who's taken a more traditional route in Monolly, one who's taken an unorthodox route in Presenting Percy, but he's been there and done that before Presenting Percy. Would you be confident, Bill, that Presenting Percy is better and just more able than Monolly?
Confident is probably going a bit too far. Obviously the person to ask about this is Davy Russell, who's, doesn't have a decision to make anymore because it's been taken out of his hands with Noel Feely riding Monolly, but he would have ridden both of these pretty much all along. I think they're 2 cracking horses. I'd be just about, and it's only just about, coming down with Presenting Percy in this race. I know his preparation has been, as you said, slightly unorthodox, but to me he's a horse, and it might be kind of stupid to say it, but he wouldn't look out of place in the Gold Cup. I think 3 miles and 2, as we saw, he won a handicap over 3.5 earlier in the season. I think stamina really is his forte. He was very impressive here at the festival last year. And we saw this year just what a class act he is. I mean, he ran away with a Grade 2 hurdle the time they dropped him back to hurdles. He put it up to our Duke last time over 2.5, and our Duke is, in my opinion, in with a serious each way out in the Gold Cup this year. So I think Presenting Percy, he ticks all the boxes for me. He's a really, really good horse, and he jumps fences really well, which is the most important thing. Monolly, on the other hand, is a little bit less exposed, I suppose, than Presenting Percy. Hasn't had as much racing. He's an out-and-out chaser, was always going to be better at this game, and he certainly is. Arguably, possibly unlucky not to be unbeaten. On form, I think he would have won the race at Leopardstown that he fell in, and in 3 runs, that's really been his only mistake. He has jumped impeccably other than that, and I wouldn't put I wouldn't have his jumping as an issue at all. He's a high class horse. We know he stays well. Even though, interestingly enough, Henry de Bromhead has been saying this week that if the ground does come up very soft, that he might think about switching him back to the JLT, which obviously would take away from this race because it would deny us the head-to-head between Presenting Percy and himself. But it's a race to savour. I think they're two cracking horses, and hopefully, touch wood, all going well, we'll see both of them in the Gold Cup next year.
I think that point you made about Monolith still having some sort of uncertainty about his target just makes Presenting Percy even more appealing, doesn't it? You say we'll be out of place in the Gold Cup. I think that's probably a fair comment. After the Galboy, he'd probably have been among the favourites and worthily so for the Stayers Hurdle. I mean, the way he won the Potemps last year was outrageous, really. And that was after we'd heard a week's worth of connections moaning that he'd been harshly done to, but maybe they were complaining he should have gone up 25 instead of 16 because it was that well handicapped and it was just embarrassing for them. He's a thorough stayer, so for him to run as well as he did over 2.5 against the lively Gold Cup horse in our tube was pretty striking. And whilst it is unorthodox, as Jamie says, and it's definitely true, not many, probably no RSA horse has gone the route that he has. I think it might actually be a benefit because he's been involved in big field competitive handicaps like the one he won on the Bridle. He's then sharpened himself up with a run over an inadequate trip. For me, I think, Black Carlton, if he's best of the British, it's a pretty sorry state of affairs, and I think I don't want to go down that road of polishy statements, but no, he really.
I must admit, I've put up Presenting Percy later on as one of the best bets of the week at the moment, as one of my charity bets. I think all what Dan says is true. For me, the Flurgas form, Monolith won the Flurgas. There was 7 lengths between the winner and the 7th. Monolith got an easy lead. He did jump well, he's a good horse, I'm not taking that away from him, but Presenting Percy has achieved a hell of a lot more in my eyes. Agree completely with the experience point. He won a 14 runner handicap over 3 mile 5 on testing ground, and he won it very, very easily. His jumping stood up well, so that competitive edge that he's got is a big plus. He's also a Cheltenham Festival winner, which shouldn't be something that's overlooked. Clearly the track is a positive for Presenting Percy. I think you look at his Timeform ratings, he's top rated. Those of you that use the Timeform ratings will know that or may know if you've looked anyway, that Presenting Percy gets his figure from the 2.5 mile run against our Duke last time out. That rating of 158 came over 2.5 miles. For a horse that won a Potemps over 3 miles last season at the festival and has a very, very easy 3 mile 5 furlong win in the mud to his name, it's hard to think that he won't better his rating back up in trip in the RSA, in my opinion. I think it's a very, very good bet. I really do. The British horses, the British staying chasers, novices, to my mind, are not much at all. I think it's been a very, very uncompetitive division all season. And like I say, the rest of the Irish basically come from the same race, the Flurgas, which was running a slow gallop and doesn't appeal as particularly solid form to me. So, yeah, I think he's one of the stronger favourites of the week, Presenting Percy.
And I've nothing really to add. Black Corton has been tremendously well placed by Paul Nicholls and tremendously well ridden by Bryony Frost. But you'd be disappointed if Black Corton was good enough to win an RSA. He wouldn't have won the Corto Star if ill-fated Fountains Windfall had stood up. And he just doesn't seem to have the quality that you want for this particular race.
Can you think of any others players down the years who've won one of the leading staying novices with his sort of profile, running almost back in the summer, where maybe we didn't give him enough credit for the winning sequence? Because I think we're all in the same boat that we don't rate him as having that good a chance.
Well, I just think Nicholls is so good with horses like this that he gets the absolute maximum out of them. You can look at some of the horses that he did it with last year. San Benedetto would be an example, where he runs them often, but he identifies the right races where they've got a live chance. He doesn't overestimate his horses, and they do end up running at this sort of level. But along the way, they've picked up as much prize money as he can get out of them.
Yeah, he's not as Cheltenham obsessed as Henderson, is he? So he'll be happily. That seems the idea to me, that he'll win Saturday handicaps with them when he can, and it won't all be about what he can do at one day in March.
Well, he's realistic about the sort of horses that he's got, and he knows that if he takes them to Cheltenham, he'll come up not only against Henderson, who's got horses primed for the meeting, but against Mullins and Gordon Elliott. Whereas if he's running Saturday week in, week out through the winter, then he's not going to face nearly the competition. And that's how he remains competitive in champion trainer standings.
So I think the sweeping this up, you look at the RSA market, you'll see presenting Percy's above 5-2. Your initial reaction is, ooh, that's a bit short given the competitive nature of the RSA. But in historical terms, the RSA perhaps isn't that competitive, certainly not this year. And the more you dig into this race, the more the answer comes back as presenting Percy. The Flogas is really interesting in conjunction with one of Billy's points in terms of Davy Russell. In that Davy Russell didn't ride Monolly when he normally does in the Flogas. It was almost as if Henry de Bromhead had a chat with Davy Russell beforehand and said, which way are you going to go when we get to the RSA? And he's looked at presenting Percy, and therefore Henry de Bromhead has taken that reaction to Bucknall Feely and get him on board. Because he rode one of the Jigginstown horses, didn't he?
Davy has a loose arrangement, I don't know how loose, but he has an arrangement with presenting Percy's owner, Philip Reynolds, that he will ride those horses when available. So, yeah, I think he was probably always going to have to ride presenting Percy, whether he wanted to or not, but I'd say he's not too disappointed.
So actually, all the evidence is in with the RSA, and you'd be quite confident about certainly arriving at the conclusion. With the Queen Mother Champion Chase, it's probably the hardest race to talk about of the whole week in the round, because we still don't know the exact lineup, in the sense that the giant presence of Douvan is potentially still looming over the whole race and the whole field. We'll start with Martin. Just what's your interpretation of this race? Do you do it individually in terms of the horses themselves, or do you look at the race more generally and try and work an angle in that way?
Yeah, well, it doesn't take John McCreek to work out that Altior's a good favourite for the Queen Mother Champion Chase, and has pretty solid form credentials. He's done everything that's been asked of him. He's never been beaten in a jumps race. One thing I would say about him is that categorically, I would say this will be the toughest race of Altior's career over jumps by some margin as well, particularly if Douvan and Min both turn up. You look at the prices that Altior's gone off over fences so far. I think the biggest price that he's been for any of his chase starts is 1 to 3, and that is an indication of the. It's not just an indication of how talented he is as a racehorse. It's also an indication of how uncompetitive the races that he's running have been. Now, that may well be the case again in the Champion Chase, and it could be that 4 to 6 is a steal. But I think it's safe to say that in Douvan and Min, he will be up against a more talented rival than he's ever had to run against over fences before. And if both of them rock up, there is a pretty fair chance that if one of them gives the run in, they give him a bit of a scare. For this reason, I wouldn't be. We've talked about some of the favourites, Bouverdare for the Champion Hurdle, for instance, who I find it nigh on impossible to knock and see where he gets beaten. I do think that genuinely there are two horses there in Min and Douvan that can actually put it up to Altior, and maybe if he makes a mistake 3 out, it might just put him off on an even keel that he don't get away with it. It's little things like that, whereas Bouverdare, I think, has got more than enough in hand to cope with some little minor blips along the way in the race. I'm not sure that's the case with Altior, so I'm not saying he will be beaten, but for me, there's a vulnerability there that would make him mean that I couldn't touch him at a very, very short price. I wouldn't put anybody off back in Douvan, I must admit, particularly non-runner no bet. Well, it had to be non-runner no bet, to be honest. You couldn't back him without that concession, because we still don't know 8 days from the race whether he's going to get there. The vibes are that he will, but we know that on his day, I would argue over the last 2 seasons, he's still got the best 2-mile chase form in the book, better than Altior. I know that Altior's top on Timeform by a pound, but we have had Douvan rated higher in the past when he was at his prime. So for those reasons, as I say, it sums it up pretty nicely. I haven't got an absolute categoric view on it, but I would be sort of lukewarm on steaming in at a short price.
Probably won't have a bet in the race, but a bit like Ron, we speculated whether Samcro might be the best horse in training. I think categorically Altior is. He gave Min a complete slapping when they ran in the Supreme. He jumps fences brilliantly. He's always had the scope to be a better chaser, and I think it's wound up that way. And what more do you want from a reappearance? He's beaten the Haldon Gold Cup, Tingle Creek winner Politolog on the bridle off a huge layoff. And looked in great nick, didn't have a hard race, so that wouldn't put you off. I wouldn't be worried about the bounce. Maybe he'll have a recurrence of an old breathing issue, but he'll have to come off the bridle to do that. And with Douvan having so much to prove in light of the layoff, and him having been 50-50 up until the other day, and Min, clearly for me, not in the same league as Altior from their meeting in the Supreme, and Altior's liking for fences, I really struggle to see this horse getting beaten. I think he's just got an outstanding combination of how he travels, how he jumps, and how he finishes his races.
Well, like Dan, I'm a huge Altior fan. I think he's the best horse around, and I'll be very disappointed if he gets beaten. I agree totally with what Dan says rather than what Martin said.
Just to talk about Altior generally, his main strength over hurdles, or the main strength that we saw, was the sort of last 10% of his race, where he suddenly found reserves and found a power that marked him out from the crowd. Now, he's not really had to tap into that final 10% at all so far in his chasing career. And is it fair to say, Billy, that if Altior would have had the setup that Min did in that Dublin chase last time, that he'd have really thrived in that environment? Did we see Min at his best because of Special Tiara and Alicia Dulon last time?
It was certainly Min's best performance, and I think possibly because of the whole uncertainty with Douvan, I think Min has been slightly overlooked. I don't think he got the credit he deserved on that occasion. He's essentially unbeaten over fences, albeit thrown out at Leopardstown over Christmas when he clearly wasn't at his best. He did well to hang on as long as he did, having raced so freely through that particular race. But we saw the last day, when he got a proper lead, when he was going a proper 2-mile gallop, I suppose the first time ever over fences, we saw how good he can be. I think the scenario at Cheltenham is going to be pretty similar. Special Tiara will be in the race again. They go very quick. He's a very good jumper. They can't go fast enough for him. Now, we saw in his hurdles form that he's not Altior. Altior was just too good for him in the Supreme, and chances are Altior might be too good for him again. But I think he's a better chance than a lot of people are kind of giving him credit for. And also there's the conundrum with Douvan. Who rides Douvan? Will Ruby get off Douvan in a champion chase? I think he'd find it very hard. I mean, Willie has gone on record as saying that Douvan is the best horse he's ever trained. And, we were all here last year talking the same way we're talking about Altior now. We all thought Douvan was pretty much past the post, and he was certainly the champion chase. So I think it'd be very difficult for Ruby not to ride him if they both run. And if that's the case, maybe Min might just be a tempting price for people. I'm not saying he'll beat Altior, but if anything happened to go wrong with Altior, he might be the one to pick up the pieces, maybe.
Very quickly, I won't be long, but I know there are quite a lot of people that use Timeform in the audience out there, so a recent introduction has been the jumped time figures that we've used over the last, they've been recorded for the last 3 seasons, I think it is, Dan, and they've only just started to be published now. One thing to note on this is that Altior comes out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is 8th on the list in terms of the time figures that he's achieved over fences. So he's only got the 8th best time, if you like, that he's actually achieved. So that is an indication that he will have to run harder and faster than he's ever had to run before. Now, I'm not for a minute saying he's not going to be capable of it. We've all seen how easy it has been for him to do what he's already done. But Min comes out £17 ahead of him on time, and Undersur's still in the champion chase, he's £14 ahead of him. So it's just something to bear in mind if you're looking at it from a slightly different angle, something that's a bit of a new introduction to Timeform as far as the jump's time figures are concerned. It does heavily point you towards, certainly in value terms, having a crack at Min, I would say.
Rounding up some of the other races on the second day and the Wednesday, when you think of Cheltenham Festival in recent years, you think of Cause of Causes, who's got this phenomenal record around Cheltenham. That reminds me of these quiz sheets that you've got in as well. Cleary, do you think he can win again in that cross-country chase?
Well, I think that since they've changed it to a conditions race as opposed to a handicap, I think it does very much play to his strengths. And in terms of the figures, he's a standout along with the Last Samurai. And the Last Samurai, if he ran in this race, I'm not sure at all that he's the type of horse that would take to a cross-country scenario, whereas we know from last year when Cause of Causes was so good that he very much does. And I'm sure that Gordon Elliott will once again have him absolutely primed for Cheltenham as a stepping stone towards another Grand National tilt. But I really can't see, if he's in form next Wednesday, what's going to trouble him in the cross-country chase. I think of the horses that are sort of 5 to 2, 11 to 4 favourites, I think he's one with the most compelling case.
We've also got the bumper on the Wednesday, and the bumper is usually a place where horses are plotted there, rumours are rife about which horse is best. But it is a National Hunt flat race, and the flat is somewhere where we often associate the weight for age, i.e. the weight that the younger horses get off the older horses, not something we normally consider or factor in to bumper races. But Dan, you've got a big point to make about, in particular, your fancy in the bumper in that regard.
Yeah, charity time, mate. AC Milan for me in this race, and as Lynchy says, part of it is the fact that as a 4-year-old he gets £8. The quite interesting thing about it, if you're boring like me, is that there's only one horse that's beaten him, and he reopposes, and he's probably 66s, that's Volcano, but their careers have taken markedly different paths since. AC Milan is a 4-year-old in age, but it's almost, as your mum says when she's on her 60th birthday, it's only a number. And with him, he just physically and mentally seems far more developed than most 4-year-olds, to the extent that he won by 11 lengths in that Newbury listed race, showing bundles of stamina. His form, and I'm rating them so they might be garbage, has gone like that every time. There's been a huge leap every time he's made the track. Brian Hughes spoke afterwards. I'm not one for this, but it was pretty clear that he thinks he's a serious animal, and he too was keen to reflect on the fact that this horse is a 4-year-old and shouldn't be doing what he has done. He's 8 to 1. Somebody tweeted me the other day saying, is he definitely going, because he'd heard a rumour that he might not be. I think they'd be mad to not go, because they're getting £8 off horses, and he's won a listed event by 11 lengths. Of course, we're going to see the Mullins Battalion, Blackbow, Holographic, but the 2 picks from him. Jamie's got some inside info from him having his ear to the ground at these other preview nights about another one called Tornado Flyer, but if he wins, I'm probably going to get sacked because he's about bottom rated. Yeah, for me, it's AC Milan. He gets weight. I think he's achieved a lot for a horse of his age, and has all the materials to cope admirably well with 4 starts under his belt already in the cauldron of a champion bumper, which can be a huge shock to a lot of these horses. I don't think it will be to him. So there.
Little minor point on the champion bumper is just that this year, because of the new founded Dublin Racing Festival, which I'm sure Billy was at where you Bill? Oh, you weren't? Okay, never mind. Well, you wouldn't have the you wouldn't have seen Blackbow and Rhinestone in the fresh then, but it did give us a little bit more form in the book to what we've had in previous years heading into Cheltenham. So the champion bumper traditionally looks sort of very much an open book, a very, very competitive race on ratings and on form. going into the race. And I think there's just a little bit more between them going into this year's race. Dan's mentioned already AC Milan is a horse that he's got top rated, but Blackbow and Rhinestone are second and third in that ratings list on the back of finishing first and second in a Grade 2 at Leopardstown last month. The rating that Blackbow achieved in that race of 121, which I'm sure is absolutely kosher and solid, Dan, would be good enough to certainly make you extremely competitive, if not win a normal renewal of the champion bumper. We usually don't have that amount of evidence going into Cheltenham, but because of that race, that Grade 2 at Leopardstown last month, we do have that body of evidence. The 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th horses, they'd won 7 or 8 bumpers between them, and they were absolutely slaughtered on the day. So you can be assured that in Blackbow and Rhinestone, you have 2 horses that, yes, they are towards the head of the market, but there's a little bit more flesh to their rating, if you like, and flesh to their form from what we've had to horses at the head of the betting in previous years.
I think it's interesting about 4-year-olds in the champion bumper. There aren't that many of them over the years, but Q-Card obviously won the race as a 4-year-old. New Year's Eve was runner-up, and last year's runner-up, whose name escapes me, was another 4-year-old. So there's sort of, you get very few of them, but they are competitive, and they should be competitive because of that weight for age allowance that they get, which is generous.
Yeah, going back to the race that Martin was talking about, Blackbow beating Rhinestone, that was definitely the best bumper that's been run in Ireland this year. Hard not to be impressed with Blackbow. They're very different types of horses. Blackbow won a British point-to-point prior to winning his first bumper for Willie, where he looked beaten and battled back, stayed on really well to win. He was much more professional the last day, it was a really good performance. But I wouldn't be surprised if Rhinestone got pretty close to him. Rhinestone is, I would imagine, an Aidan O'Brien cast-off. He's by Montew. He's out of a half-sister of Distant Music, so he was bred for better things than this. And I would say drier ground will really help him. But I've got I could be wrong, I've got the impression all year that Holographic is Willie's #1 bumper horse. He was just touched off in a Land Rover last year. Big field, looked a bit green on the day. He was beaten by Vision the Flow, but it was still a very good run. There was an awful lot of winners came out of that race. And he was really impressive on his return to action in December. He slammed a horse called Dunvegan, he beat him about 15 lengths, and Dunvegan himself went out and bolted up in a bumper next time. But I thought it was interesting after the race. Willie Mullins is, I think, unlike some trainers, Willie Mullins talks a lot of sense after races. I think it's interesting to listen to him. Some trainers will give you the same old spiel, like, you know, thanks very much, and sure, we're delighted, and the lads were happy, and, you know, thanks to Andrew and Richie and all the lads at home. Whereas Willie will actually tell you something that's worth listening to. And straight after the race about Holographic, he said, yeah, we think this fella's probably on our Cheltenham team. So it's not something he says all the time about bumper horses, but he was really impressive, and it'll be very interesting to see what Patrick rides. Patrick usually gets the choice of these bumper horses. He doesn't always get it right, as we've seen in the past, but certainly if he plumbed for Holographic, he's the one that I'd like to be on. Willie is a strong team, carefully selected, is a good horse, probably more of a stayer. And Lynch, you mentioned Tornado Flyer, who only scrambled home on his debut, but again the horse he beat was one of Gordon Elliott's who's won since, so it was probably better form than it looked. And he's also going to run a horse called Squadron Commander, who was impressive first time, but his form hasn't worked out. So, but again, we've been here before with Willie. He's one of the likes of Briar Hill in the past, who had won once, didn't look anything special, and then bolted up in a bumper. But it's hard to know exactly how good, and maybe he doesn't even know himself which his best ones are. But I've got the impression all year that Holographic might be the one.
Just to mention that Tornado Flyer, it was just that I'd heard that various people say on the quiet that Ruby's going to ride that Tornado Flyer in the bumper. Now obviously, knowing that Patrick does get first choice by and large in the bumper, that's less relevant than it might otherwise be, but even so, that's a horse who could easily have in price if indeed Ruby does end up riding that. We've got 2 handicaps. Has anyone got anyone for the Fred Winter or the Coral Cup on this panel? Fred Winter?
I have had a bet in the Fred Winter already. I've backed Lisp of Alan King's, who ran in the Victor Ladorum up at Haydock the other week, had to run there because he needed to get a mark. Needed to have the third run in order to qualify for running in the Fred Winter. So you have to have 3 runs in order to actually qualify to run in the race. So Lisp had to go to Haydock last month, was far too keen in a small field, pulled too hard. It just didn't happen for him. He actually ran really well, all things considered. He was only beaten 2.5 lengths, having pulled very hard early and made a real mess of the second last when he was still up sides. He's got an extremely good pedigree. He's a half-brother to Thomas Campbell and Coeur de Leon, who would both be rated a fair bit higher than what he is going into the Fred Winter. He's got a mark of 132 Lisp. So I've backed him. I think a big field, well-run race, Cheltenham, it'll all suit him well, and I've been impressed with him all season.
I'm the most ill-disciplined punter in the room, without doubt, but one thing I would say is hold fire on Coral Cup Martin Pike, because so many of the horses are doubly declared. You really don't know which is the target for either. The Pipey race has become almost as good as the Coral Cup in recent years, due to the fact that there are, if they can't get in the main race, then the secondary choice, these ones lower down the handicap, is that. But there's very little between them nowadays. And also at this stage, you're playing 4 places. There'll be bookies undoubtedly on the day, will be going 5 and 6, or the night before. So for me, these big handicap hurdles, particularly those two, with they're having such a crossover of entries, I just wouldn't entertain betting at this stage.
Right, well in that case, has anyone got any questions about the Tuesday or the Wednesday? The next 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll have our break. So, yes.
Hello.
Hiya.
You alright?
I'm Mike J.
Yeah, not bad at all. You hear a lot of talk about course form and about how important it is. Statistically, because that's what you kind of trade in, how important is it?
I think it's more a reassurance more than anything. If you fancy a horse and then you can add into the mix that he's been to the festival powder keg, as they like to call it. They don't like to call it that, actually, they don't. But I'm going to run with it because I like it. So this festival powder keg that I speak of is such that it's encouraging when certain horses have shown that they're untroubled by the day, they're untroubled by the track. It's the same as anything. It's not like a flat horse who runs at Southall, which is so unique that you want to see Southall form time and time again. But I just think it's comforting, and that ties in actually with the horse I put up as a charity bet in the bumper 50 each way on AC Milan. He's the one horse in the field who's gone to Cheltenham and shown his capabilities on the track, so it's definitely something to consider. Yeah, apart from the one Mark mentioned.
But statistically, in the 10 handicaps last year, 5 of them had run well at the Cheltenham Festival before. Sorry.
I mean, you certainly get a lot of horses who come back time and again. You can look at a horse like Cause of Causes and you know that he's going to be primed for it, you know that he handles the track. Whereas you look at a horse like St Calvados, who's got 3 really good wins, but they've all been on flat tracks, and it's just something you don't know until he runs there next Tuesday.
Can I just ask the panel quickly, I know he's not race fit, but how many rides do you think Ruby Walsh might do a day? 2, 3, 4? How many?
Nope.
How many rides might Ruby have per day? Will he tone it down a bit because of where he's at fitness-wise?
It's Cheltenham week. If Ruby could get 10 rides a day, he'd take them. I believe he's due to start race riding again this week, whenever the Irish racing starts back. But you can be sure he'll be as fit as he can be, and he'll ride as many horses as he can.
You would actually want to see him, wouldn't you, riding before the festival? Just to, if the Supreme Novice was your first ride back, having been out. I know it's Ruby Walsh, but even so, you know, it's not an easy thing to sort of just go straight back into Cheltenham in the Supreme Novice. So ideally, if you were all over a couple of his horses and his rides on day one, you'd want him to see him back at Goran or something over the weekend, just to have a sit in a field.
Absolutely, and the other thing that I suppose has been a bit overlooked, I don't know how big an issue it is, but especially in these novice races, Ruby'd be riding horses that he hasn't ridden all year, so he doesn't really know them. I'm sure he'd have ridden them at home, he'd have schooled them at home. It's not quite the same as being in a race scenario. So the likes of Get a Bird, he's never sat on Get a Bird. He actually did ride Next Destination in the bumper last year, so at least he has racecourse experience on him. He hasn't ridden footpad over fences, for example. So, you know, it's a small issue perhaps, but it's something to consider at the same time.
Hello, right, nice one.
Liam Gallagher, where is he?
Yeah.
Where is he?
A City fan from Manchester, yeah?
Good lad.
Right, it's only a quickie. Kalashnikov got a bit of a panning.
I don't know his voice.
Kalashnikov got a bit of a panning.
Alright, pal, sorry.
That was me, yeah.
No, it wasn't, it was everyone.
Okay.
You've got 4 lads here who have got 2 horses with Amy Murphy, so we're a little bit biased. But what we will say is, Kalashnikov, progressive horses, came second in the top.
Yeah, we know this, pal. What's the question?
No, it came second, and also lost a shoe to 2 or 3 fences out or something like that. But you know, yeah, fair enough on the horse, but don't underestimate the fact that that trainer may well get the horse ready, and that horse will be ready for Cheltenham.
Listen, I think she's absolutely brilliant. Genuinely, I do. She's done really, really well in her first 18 months, but I don't fancy the horse one bit. That's just my opinion. I honestly don't. He was under pressure at the end of the back straight at Newbury. It was an absolute slog of a race. He had a brutally hard race as a prep for Cheltenham. I just don't fancy him. I think he'll bomb. So it's my opinion. If it's wrong, it's wrong. But I do think it's a good yard for what it's worth.
What made you choose Amy Murphy?
What made you choose Amy Murphy?
20-odd-year-old blonde Amy Murphy. What made you choose her? A training talent, Jill. Not Alan Berry, is she? Don't say you're married to her, because I'm really not scared.
No, to be honest, Jesus Christ.
What's your favourite breakfast item?
Black pudding. White pudding for Billy, obviously.
We've got a few fans of moving the times for the Close Brothers. Any thoughts on that?
Matt? Man over there taking time to ask a question.
Who put the times in the Close Brothers?
Oh, right. Well, to be honest, I've not done an awful lot of work on that race, so I don't have an opinion on this.
I know, on that preview panel I was on last night, Nick Schofield was there, and that was his best bet at the meeting, move with the times. He said it's been aimed at it all year, and Nichols was really happy with it.
It's been ridden like it's been aimed at it all year.
Right, so about half an hour, and then we'll reconvene, talk about the last 2 days, comfort break, drink break, food will be delivered about 9 o'clock, so we'll come back about 9:15. Thanks everyone. And don't forget the quiz sheets, they need to be handed in now if you can, over to the lads near the door, if you want to be involved. Come on.